So then, we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, a refined and the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage, so then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find layers of understanding of the spring feast, the autumn feast, and also the turning of the cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries. As we read then Yeshayahu, we can establish then the relationship with the mighty Creator and His Son via the returning of the holy cities. Only have in mind, Yeshayahu the prophet was absolutely right. He was right on the point, and he was very precise. Though we understand there was 1,000 years of deceit, as prophet Daniel prophesied, you find then the 12th chapter of Daniel making reference of this period of time where his people then would roam the earth for 1,000 years, and then at the end of it, a very high knowledge for the purposes of trade. Let's then understand what's going on in the world, so then we can make sure we have a grasp of the situation. The first 800 years of this time of deceit was granted to Great Britain. You can analyze, study the history for yourself. You can understand at roughly 1009 there were changes in the world, and a new world order was then obviously founded. So then later on came 200 years granted for the United States, and this time is already gone. So let's then make sure we understand the importance of the holy instructions and then the Eastern culture, comparing with 800 years of Great Britain, comparing with the 200 years of the United States. Both of these, they led the world for a time. Now let's understand the holy instructions as a whole. Can we believe the holy instructions were then completed and discarded? Can we understand the importance of a granting of 800 years plus couple of hundred, comparing with some nations, for instance, 4,000 years of history? And the holy instructions, we are over 7,000 years of history, shortly after 7,000. Can we make sure we understand this topic and also be aware that if we believe the holy instructions were discarded, then truly the world is lost. Time of the restoration period simply speaks of the restoration of the sons of Ibrahim, the son of trade and the son of tabernacling. But let's then understand another factor. The sons of Ishmael, they are obviously involved in gathering themselves because they understand in the spirit there is the authority returning to them, and they sense these in the spirit. Not only themselves, but at this point in time, China is leading the world. They've got 57% of the world's trade already, and China is the number one. So then, with this in mind, let's then evaluate what Great Britain did roughly a couple hundred years ago. They tried to force themselves in maintaining the power, did they not? Could they do it? No. So as the United States is trying then to maintain power over the world, can they do it? No. The answer is very obviously. So then, let's evaluate what this means as far as when we read the 11th chapter and the 21st verse. It speaks of the despised one. Why then the despised one be United States? Unfortunately, U.S. is trying to extend its grip and its power via military force. That's why then the despised one is down there. There are a few events at the moment, as we already studied in previous videos regarding then China in dealing with Congo, and then China dealing with other countries, the relationship with the Kingdom of the North and South. We understand then the relationship of the Soviet Union in Cuba, for instance, than the Gentile Netzer, speaking of the socialist group, and must become greater than the former for the protection of trade. Then we had evaluated then the entrance of Egypt, as you find these in the 8th verse of the 11th chapter. Also Egypt included in the plan, as Egypt is making a deal with China, and then joining up with the Soviet Union, and then maintaining protection so then trade can extend it on. But let's then understand another factor. Because of these, the envious or the envying part of the United States, obviously they are trying to get a grip via force. Because of a journalist that was beheaded, then U.S. wants to go on and then wants to invade sections of Syria. It won't be very nice, because Syria is obviously joint friends with the Soviet Union. That's where then Mr. Putin of the Soviet Union must make a strong stand and do not let U.S. get involved. However, there is a factor. If the U.S. does not get involved, they won't receive the title of despised one. We can work on the reverse because we know the future, and it's very bluntly stated by Daniel the prophet. The problem is Australia is considering joining up with the United States in this crazy adventure, and it won't work. The reason why U.S. is becoming the despised one is because precisely of these provocations for war. Any place at any time when the U.S. has a bad economy, they're trying to find a war anywhere in order to get their economy up. It is a strategy known throughout the world. And at this point, if Australia joins the U.S. in these strikes, then would not be very wise on their part. So what is going on as far as Ezekiel the 37th chapter? We understand the forward motion at the moment is for the Soviet Union recuperate their geographical area and then re-establishing themselves as then a country producing arms for the purposes of protection of trade. Then, as we understand this factor, what does it lead then to the despised one, very precisely and very importantly placed in the 21st verse of the 11th chapter? It is trying to hold the world via war, trying to find problems and then joining up with the military and giving arms and so on and so forth, trying to recuperate the economy of a nation via arms. It won't work. The instructions are already given as the end of the story. Not only it won't work, but then later on they're going to retrieve their ships, as it's stated. So there is a retrieval of U.S. forces from the world. So then, a nation joining up with them at this moment would be truly stupid. If Mr. Tony, Prime Minister of Australia, is pondering helping them, he's going to get in trouble, because it won't work. At this point in time, we are watching then the sons of Ishmael, the Islamic world, joining up themselves for the receiving of the authority of trade. That's why China is involved, and we are returning to those old ways of trade, where Chinese was then obviously mixed with Arabs, and the Arabs then involved in many countries, including Egypt. You can read for yourself, Egypt is included. As far as Egypt, when we read this section on the 8th verse, try to understand this factor. Previously on the 7th verse we were talking of the Gentile Netzer. The word Netzer comes from then the Messiah himself, because he is and was from the lineage of David. Then was born the king. Then he used these on Gentile terms. So we can understand the Gentile Netzer coming from a system of socialism. As we understand, Cuba was obviously pardoned for 90% of the debt that they had during the time of the 60s, during the Cold War. And Congo is already joining up them, so finishing up the work of Mr. Castro and Che Guevara. Quite incredible. Thus we understand then Gentile nature. Then moving on, you find yourself studying then the Kingdom of the North and its influence amongst then the Egyptians for the purposes of trade, as China then is including Egypt in their economy. Then you find obviously the United States being outside of the deal. Then they get angry. Obviously they try to find some sort of a problem then to get a war started. So then, because of a journalist that was beheaded, they want to invade Syria. Quite crazy. How many people are beheaded? But let's then be wise, because whatsoever nations then join the US in this crazy idea of going against the Islamic world or the sons of Ishmael, it simply won't work. At this point in time, the sons of Ishmael will be prosperous. So the best way of having this problem is simply protecting the civilians in areas of uncertainty. For instance, northern Iraq, they should have a long time ago simply protected an area for the civilians. And then you should have, for instance, the Germans, French people also, and then the Australians, if they want to join New Zealand, then simply protecting the area for the purposes of receiving the civilians and treating them properly. But as far as going against the Islamic world, they are crazy. They are trying to control once again the world via force. It won't work. Chapter 11 is very simple. However, it was explained before during the time of the Restoration period, because the hands of the Creator is at work. Nations should be concerned of what not to do. And going against the prophecy of Ezekiel, the 37th chapter, is extremely dangerous. There is one way and one way only. And the way is the Creator's way via what the prophets prophesied. That's why you read the despised one, trying to extend its time beyond what it should have. You can be sure of it, at some point they will retrieve their ships from many nations. It was prophesied and must be completed. So then, as we ponder this time, let's then evaluate the news and observe the intricate problem that the U.S. is going to get itself into it. Let's only evaluate until comes the 21st verse. It might take some time yet, but it will come. So please stay tuned, much more coming up.